Now I'm using this car on a rally in September of this year, that's 2022, and there are a few things I want to do to prepare it for the rally. The first is I'm going to change the cylinder head. This is a standard cylinder head, and I'm going to put an aluminium Z head on. The reason for that is that although this drives all right, I've got a Warford gearbox in it, slower, different ratio in the differential. It just would ride easier if it had a little bit more pulling power. Now the aluminium head that I'm going to put on it should give it that just extra bit, which will make it a lot easier to tour. So I've got that to do. Also I'm replacing the timer. Now the timer I've got down here is a brush timer. It's an aftermarket timer. It's a little bit worn, and what happens is that when you get up to speed relatively speaking, the timer can miss. So you get a little bit of a miss in the engine. So I'm changing that timer to, I think it's an Anderson timer. This one down here. Yes, an Anderson timer. From the feedback I've had, that should give me a much better running engine at road speed. So I'm making that change. To do all of this, I'm taking the radiator off. I'm going to give it a good flush out. It's been on the road for probably 13 years, so it's time for a good clean out. So I'll do that. So I'll take the radiator out, which will make it a lot easier to work on the head, and also to work on adjusting the new timer. The other thing I need to do is replace the fuel line. Now I've got a rubber fuel line coming in from the petrol tank down there, and I've also got a motorbike fuel tap. It's got a small leak in it, so I'm going to replace the fuel line and the tap. So I've got that to do as well. While I'm at it, I'll probably check over the rest of the car just to make sure everything's okay. Make sure all the connections. I'll adjust the coils. I've got a coil tester that I can use to make sure they're running properly. So all in all, there's just a few things to do. So the rally's not till September, but I want to get things well and truly changed now, and be able to run it to make sure everything's going okay. Apart from that, well, that's what I'll start on. I'll see what turns up when I start to pull things down, but hopefully everything else should be pretty well okay. Right, heads off and everything's now accessible. I did a quick check on the head, first without the gasket. The pistons are hitting the head. I can't determine where at the moment because I don't have any Prussian blue. I'll just getting some of that, and then I'll actually find out exactly where it's hitting. With an old gasket on that's already compressed, it's not hitting at all, so hopefully I'll have no trouble getting the right clearance. This block has been skimmed, so that's the reason why it's probably hitting. Pistons are coming up a little bit higher, but I'm hoping I won't have to do too much die grinding in the head to minimise where it's hitting. So, but anyway, it's not hitting with a gasket, so that's a positive. But certainly without a gasket, it is hitting on at least the two centre cylinders. I'm not sure about the others. Okay, the timer. This is the brush timer that I've had on, and I don't know whether that could be seen, but this is not a high mileage vehicle, but you can see where the plastic, and it's a form of plastic anyway, is starting to tear apart on the edges of the brass contact, and I think that's just causing the brush to skip occasionally, which results in a mess. So anyway, I'm changing that to an Anderson timer. This is a brush timer, of course, as the brush just popped out. So I've got to replace the brush. I've got the Anderson timer. I haven't unpacked it yet. I need to read up a bit on how to adjust it. This is the Anderson timer, which has, I'll call it a flapper, going around instead of a brush. I don't know whether that's the correct term, but it's good enough. There are the contacts, very substantial, where the flapper goes around and makes contact. You can, or from what I've read initially, you can adjust the timing or to get them an even spark by bending these flaps. I don't know how easy it is to bend those, but I'll certainly soon find out. However, before I can even get to that stage, I need to be replacing the seal in behind the plate here. Now, this has just got the original felt seal. With the timer, they provide a neoprene seal, so I've got to look at how I put that in. Hopefully that's not too hard. And that's the thing that I call a flapper. So I've got to install that instead of the brush. So there's a few things to do, but certainly from the little bit I've read, being able to see exactly what's happening in adjusting this will be a lot of help. So having the head off, I'll be able to find exactly where top dead centre is with the dial gauge, and be able to make appropriate adjustments. So it's a lot easier to do with a motor in this condition. For those that haven't seen a T motor, some people may not have, enormous pistons, runs about 2.9 litres, so they're very, very large, only 20 horsepower, but this aluminium head should increase that by about another 6 horsepower, or thereabouts anyway. Nothing to do on the top of the motor yet. As I say, I'm waiting on some Prussian blue, mail order, and that'll come, and then I'll start to address that. But first thing I'll do is the timer. I fitted the oil seal in the back there. Had to use a bit of sealant because it's not entirely tight. That's apparently normal. They don't always fit neatly. I won't obviously be starting the car until that's sealed, but then again I'm a long way off starting it. The thing I'll call a flapper is installed, and what I'm now doing is setting up the advanced retard rod. Now, according to the instructions, I'm going to get the piston just past top dead centre as it's just going down. Now, I've been able to mark top dead centre on the pulley. I'll probably put a notch in the back there when I'm finished, but just got a pencil mark. Top dead centre was there. Actually, when it's lined up with that that boss there on the timer plate at the back there, it's now just a little bit past. The piston has just started to go down now. So the adjustment required is that the ignition should just spark when it's in the position of just after top dead centre. Now the lever is fully up on the inside of the vehicle. This is not quite in the right adjustment. Also, this was adjusted for the brush timer, so it could well be different. So I need to turn the ignition on, find out where that's just sparking. So I'll turn this left or right. When it's just sparking, then I adjust the rod to suit. So I'll just do that next. I've chosen a different way to set the control lever. I'm using a multimeter instead of having the ignition spark. So it's just a case of positioning the timer so I get a connection on the multimeter. So by turning that slightly, oh, there it is there. So it's just making contact in that position, just there. I'll just back that off. Okay, that's the point of contact right there. So what I now need to do is to make sure the rod is in the right position, and at the moment it's a little bit short. I've got to slacken this off and wind this out a little bit, so I'll do that and set the rod so that'll be in the right position when it's in the fully retard position on the quadrant on the steering wheel there. So I thought that's an easy way to do it. So I'll set that first, and then I'll go about seeing whether the seeing whether the contacts are equal on each of the cylinders. What apparently you can get is when the engine turns, so that's all right on number one, but you might find that when it hits the next contact, it will either hit before or after the position on the flywheel. So I can do that. I have to make up a little quadrant in here to mark where, either in here or on the crank handle, as to where on the stroke the next cylinder will make contact. Now that's the contact on number one, just after top dead centre, and then I'll check cylinders 2, 3 and 4 to see if they're making contact in exactly the same position. Anyway, at this stage I'll just make the spark lever in the right position. As I say, it's not quite there. I need to change it slightly. What I'm doing here is actually checking the timing. The timer itself is on. The rotor inside is been fitted to the camshaft, and what I'm first of all doing is seeing where in the stroke the rotor is actually making contact with these contact points on the casing. The way I do that, you can do it by connecting the coils up. I'm not doing that, I'm using a multimeter, and by using the multimeter I'm checking when the rotor makes contact with the relevant position on the relevant cylinder on the casing. So I turn the motor with the crank, and as I turn, I watch the multimeter. As soon as the rotor makes contact, it will show on the meter, and then I make a mark on this piece of cardboard at the front here, just by running the pen up alongside the crank handle and noting which cylinder it is. Now, I've just done that, and what I've got is that the rotor is making contact at slightly different positions on the rotation of the crankshaft. Number 1 and 2 cylinders are very close to where they should be. In fact, they're very close together, bearing in mind that's not totally accurate using this method of marking. But cylinders 4 and 3 are actually making contact much later. So just looking at it, cylinder 1 is making contact about 15 degrees after top dead centre, but cylinder 3 is probably close to 30 degrees, so that will lead to sort of rough running. So what I'm doing now is I take the casing off, and I've got to bend the contacts. In this case with cylinder 3, I've got to bend it up slightly, so when the rotor turns it will make contact earlier, and hopefully that will bring cylinder 3 closer to the other cylinders. So it's going to take a while to check it, take it off, bend it, recheck it and so on. So I'll continue this and see how close I can get them. The end result of all the adjustment is that I've got them all on the one line here. So that's all 4 cylinders are making contact at that point. There's top dead centre, and the angle in here is about 14-15 degrees. Where I started, cylinder 1, cylinder 2, cylinder 4 and cylinder 3. So it took a fair time sort of bending them, trying not to bend them too much, but gradually getting them closer and closer to the one point. But now I'm confident that they all fire evenly, and the full retard point with the position of the lever fully up is that the engine will be in retarded position at about 15 degrees. So the timing is right now, so that's good. And the next thing I'll move on to is the head.